are you in on these Chasing 3 episodes?
I don't.
That's a no.
This is so Schaefer.
I don't know that they're made for me.
That's a
but I
no.
do enjoy that they exist. Like it's a fun like look behind the curtain. It gives you an opportunity to see people's personalities. It gives you an opportunity to like experience what actually happens over there instead of concocting it in your own brain.
I don't know if it's made for me.
But yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing. I always get a little weird about it because it's like, you know, I mean, it's ultimately a narrative controlled thing. So how everything looks is kind of how they want it to look, and we know that Matt Rule is a little bit of a perfectionist in those regards, and so I'm sure he has very strong opinions on what's going to be shown and what's not going to be shown and everything like that. But ultimately, I mean, it's the best look that we have inside the program most of the time. So yeah, but I'm not sitting there Zapruder filming it for the 30 minutes that it's going on, trying to identify every single thing that's happening in these videos.
So, Schaefer, I think I understand from like a football standpoint. You're like, yeah, you probably can't glean much from it. But do you like the insight we get into some of these players' personalities that we probably wouldn't get otherwise? Like MJ Sherman, I thought was kind of the star of the one last night.
Yeah, I haven't watched the most recent one, but I do enjoy that because, you know, you get these brief snippets, or I shouldn't even say you. I mean, I get these brief snippets when we get the opportunity to talk with these guys, and so it's always kind of fascinating because I never want to pretend like I know who these people are, because I really don't. I get the 6-minute version after a win or a loss, or a Tuesday press conference, or, you know, the spring camp version of a guy. And you never quite really get the full extent. Like I probably have a better feeling for who individuals are as recruits than when they've been in the program for 3 years, because they've changed a lot and I don't talk to them as much in that span. And so these videos do highlight their personalities, and it lets you kind of see them as fully formed individuals, which is a shocking thought for some people. They're not just football playing robots. And so that is probably as big of a value as the thing has, is that it humanizes in a way that lets you know the guy that you're yelling at for fumbling the football probably feels worse than you do about it too.
You just freely said, hey, I don't want to pretend like I know these guys just because of the 6 minutes. When you say that, it's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. But do you realize how I think that is not the norm?
Yeah, it feels like we know them.
It feels like most people feel like they know these guys because of whatever, right? But like that was the first thing you said. It was like, you know what? I don't really know these guys. And I'm like, well, shoot, we don't really.
Well, that's kind of the whole thing that is wild about it, is that you'll get, and especially on the message board, and I understand where it comes from. I do this with the Minnesota Vikings. I do this with the Cleveland Guardians. Like, I'm not trying to say I'm above it. It's just a very different viewpoint that I have when it comes to Nebraska football. It's just, you get snippets of who they are when they're playing. You get snippets of how the broadcast shows them. You get snippets of how the media talks about them. But you don't know what they're like on a Sunday at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, it's just people are incredibly different when that camera isn't on their face and they're being asked questions. People are incredibly different when they're not having to respond to an emotional situation like a football game and coming off the high of a win or the low of a loss. Like, it's just sometimes we're a little too confident that we know all of these individuals as fully formed people, and we don't. And these things help, but like I said, they also control a little bit of the narrative too. So you don't know everything, but you know more than you did.
We're talking with Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, so this is something that came out, I think, last week with the Bruce Feldman Freaks list from The Athletic, and Nebraska got 2 guys on there, Tommy Hill and Vince Genatone. What I wanted to ask you, though, is, are there guys that you look at either from younger classes or that maybe haven't emerged yet that you look like as like, okay, these are guys that I think could kind of fit into that category at some point in their Nebraska careers where you're just kind of blown away with their physical gifts?
Well, I think the obvious two, and they're both young and they have to actually prove that it's beyond just their measurables. I mean, the obvious two are just people aren't generally built like Malachi Coleman and Carter Nelson. And so they would have opportunities to end up on that list. They have to go and do it, and they have to do it both from the athletic standpoint, and they need to do it from the football standpoint and all of those things. But they're two guys that, end up on there. I mean, there's a lot of athletic talent that you never really hear about, or you hear about in terms of the recruiting that maybe hasn't manifested itself into being the best version of a football player. But there's, for example, a guy like Henry Lutovsky, and I know this is a weird one to use, but just go with it.
No, I love it. Let's go.
This is a guy that can throw around, he can throw around a ton of weight in the weight room. But then he also moves faster than you realize a human should at 320 pounds, whatever he is, and 6'6". Like the power speed index of some of these linemen, and Nebraska's not alone here, but like what some of these guys are capable of doing is sometimes jaw-dropping, and it's not necessarily indicative that they're going to be an amazing offensive lineman or defensive lineman. It just shows you how difficult it is to play those positions because of the type of people and the type of athletes. It's easy to get enamored with wide receiver speed or, the size or the jumping ability. Look inside the trenches, and there are some dudes in there that do things that seem like it defies physics. And Nebraska definitely has a couple of those guys. It's just you're not always going to see them or hear about them on a list like that. But they can do some incredibly athletically gifted things that should not be coming out of 6'6", 325 pounds. I
don't have any numbers on this guy, just from the little bit that I saw him at practice, and from like I feel like Keona Davis is like a weirdly explosive kind of freak show that we may see. Maybe he makes the list, maybe he doesn't. But that's a guy that I thought of. I was like, he kind of seems like a freak.
My favorite thing about Keona Davis is it's not like Nebraska set out to get him. It just sort of worked in their favor because Kalen DeBoer leaves Washington. They have these scholarships available. They had talked to him in the spring. They make the phone call. And then now we're talking about a guy who, in one of the deepest positions, could potentially, and it's probably unlikely, but could potentially play out of a red shirt because he has shown up and looks the way that he does and plays the way that he does. And it's kind of like Nebraska reached into their winter coat in January and pulled out a $20 bill. And that's sort of what Keona Davis feels like in recruiting terms, because this was not, I mean, they lost Carlin Jones the month before, and he's going to be really good, and that's going to hurt. But Keona Davis is a pretty nice backup plan that just kind of fell into your lap that you didn't even realize existed until it did.
Schaefer, when you're taking a look at, excuse me, kind of how Satterfield described their offense, he was generic or general without being kind of general. I think he knows what he means when he says pro style, and they always want to have the ability to run the ball. As you're starting to like glean little glimpses of this offense, hear what Coach Sat and Coach Thomas and Coach Rule are saying, is there a position group that you think will be more important than we're actually thinking right now based on what you've heard lately?
Could I say the tight end?
I am 100% with you.
and not just because people are really excited about Thomas Fedoni, but because I think they like the different body types, and I think they like Nate Borkercher a lot, and I think they're going to play in a lot of, 12 personnel. I just think they're going to do stuff at the tight end position, and they're going to try, like they did this at South Carolina with Spencer Rattler. I mean, they can put 3 tight ends and use them in different ways, line them up in different spots, hide guys, move guys around, just kind of do different things at that tight end room. And it's not the one that you think of. Like we're predisposed to always want to talk about quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. And especially because it feels like this wide receiver group is really deep and really talented. And I'm very high on it. But I think the tight end room sort of gets lost in the factor outside of Thomas Fedoni.
Agreed.
But I think they have some guys that Nebraska's a little excited about, and they can probably find different ways to utilize and maybe hide them a little bit in the offense. You get so worried about covering all the receivers or being worried about the running back, you let the backup tight end or the second string, third string tight end, whatever the formation is, sneak out on you. I think they're going to be able to attack in that manner.
Where does Luke Lindemeyer fit into that equation for you? I know it's a guy DB's really high on.
So I think he is one of those guys that's bigger inside the walls over there than what we realize outside. How that manifests itself in terms of offensive production, I don't look for him to catch like a bunch of passes. But is he someone that could be critical for when they want to line it up and run it? Yes. I think he's a big blocking tight end for him. I think the success that they found with Luke Lindemeyer made it a lot easier to go look at an Eric Ingwerson and be like, yeah, we want that. We need more.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how I would describe the impact that he's going to have, but he's going to play. And he's going to play more than people probably think that he will. And he's going to have a role that's probably more valuable to the people that understand what they're attempting to do than the rest of us at large. But I mean, even last year, you could tell they liked Luke Lindemeyer a lot. He played a lot, and he's going to play a lot again. And I'm not looking for him to catch critical passes, but is he the guy that's helping clean up and sealing off the edge and providing the extra, emphasis in the run game? I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
How about when he asked me if he thought he was an NFL player?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you?
Schaefer, the reason I brought up Lindemeyer was A, because he was in the episode last night, but B, like I wonder, as you described that situation of, kind of the second tight end maybe gets lost or whatever. I think of a guy like Lindemeyer, where you just mentioned he's probably going to be mostly for like blocking, establishing the run game, things like that. But then he seems like a prime candidate to kind of get lost if you do run a play action or something like that. Like, is he dynamic enough in your mind to be able to fit that role where, hey, when you do decide to fake everybody out, like, he's going to be a problem?
I think it's going to be more about the timing of you've set it up, you've chained this group of plays together. You have everyone thinking one thing, and then you sneak it out another way. And whether that's this is kind of the tight end throwback play. I don't think he has to be the most explosive person in the world if you time it and you set it up well. So I wouldn't worry about that a lot. I don't think it's going to happen a ton, but it wouldn't surprise me if just like you sneak that third offensive lineman in as a tight end and suddenly he's catching the touchdown. In the NFL, they love to do this. The Lions love to do this as 2-point conversions and then not tell people that he's actually supposed to be tight end. So it's a possibility. Try to get my shot.
Hey, so Mike J, let me ask you. I get the sense, this isn't leading, but I get the sense some of the names that get dropped and we kind of like we take it and we run, and I get the sense there's this young group that is right on the fringe, right? Could be in the secondary, could be in the tight end room, could be in the running back room. I'm a big Mekhi Nelson guy, but it may not be this year, right? I hear Quinn Clark and I'm like, and I think people think, ooh, but the bodies and the guys that Quinn Clark would have to jump, it's a lot. So you could still be on the come, but it seems like they're prepping for and I get it. This year is huge and we got to get this one in. And I'm certainly not being dismissive, but maybe we've got to take into account that they're giving us a precursor of what's to come, but maybe not yet.
I think the best way to sort of look at what you're talking about, and I agree, I think they have a deep roster. I think this is one of the deeper rosters I've covered, to be honest. And that goes all the way back to 2009 with Bo, when I first started covering football at Nebraska. The thing that stands out to me, guys, is how you can utilize those 4 games and still protect redshirts. Yeah. You can get guys in, and you can get value out of them, Mekhi Nelson or an Amari Sanders or a Mario Buford or a, Ian Flint. Like, I'm just trying to think of different people that maybe we're not going to be talking about them as primary cogs of the 2024, great start to the Matt Rule era, but we're going to be talking about it as, man, it was pretty critical that guy got to be in that situation against Purdue that helped him in 2025. Like, I see that a lot. I look at that secondary.
Yeah.
And I look at John Butler about knowing exactly what he likes and who he likes and how he's going to do things and who's going to be able to play for him. And I think that guy walked into a situation where they have like 9 freshman defensive backs. And these guys are going to compete like hell, and the best players are going to emerge out of it. And they may not even need that best player or best couple players this year, except for certain situations or at certain times. And what a great thing that's going to be if those guys stick around and continue to develop, because they're going to get some of the fruits of 2024 while also protecting eligibility on the back end, becoming better players because of it, and then having like a really nice runway into their spring of 2025. Like, it's a really ideal setup for development over there right now.
Well, yeah, Shafe, do you think that helps with retention too? Like, there's always, like, you kind of give guys a little bit of a nugget to keep them going and be like, hey, here are the things you need to work on. Here are the places you're good. You saw it for yourself without being like, oh, and now you're a sophomore, right? Like that. Go ahead.
Look how I stuck around from last year. I mean, so they clearly have the mindset, or at least last year into this year, they had the mindset of, okay, I didn't get the opportunity to play as much, or this didn't quite go as I wanted, or whatever, but it's out there. And I like what we're doing, and I like what we're building. And when they talk about building the family and all of that, the idea is that it should be hard to leave your family. It should be hard to basically be like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get as much playing time here as I would over there, but am I going to like it over there as much? Are they going to treat me as well? I'm going to get developed? Am I going to become the person I want to be? That's what makes it hard to leave. When we talk about retention, everyone wants to talk about NIL and playing time, and those are huge factors, obviously. But sometimes the environment and being comfortable and being where you're wanted and you're going to be treated well and you're going to be treated with respect, that is as big of a part of the retention. And you trust the people who are tasked with development. But the hardest part about the transfer portal for me is that you're just guessing the next place that you go to is going to be the one that's going to propel you into where you want to go. You don't really have that much information. You get to spend a weekend with them. You didn't really go through a full recruiting process. You're just guessing. And I think that's why the transfer portal is, good in some places and can be really bad in others. I mean, you got to have the foundation or it's not going to work for anybody. See the state next door.
All right, my pragmatic friend, I need you to help me because this is what I think. So I'm giving you that ammo early. So feel free to tell me I'm all wet. I have convinced myself, because I believe it to be true, that I understand how important this year is, right? Everybody's pretty hype and the schedule's sweet. But, man, the way that I'm listening to these guys and I'm watching and I'm listening to us talk, and, you talk about the guys in the secondary or the receiving room or the tight end. Like, how amazing would it be to just have Nebraska have a minimal amount of success this year and then build, like, next year appears to be like this monster potential year. But I can say that without not, like, I want a ball this year. Like, I won 8 wins. I want to be in a bowl. You know what I mean? So, but the coach in me says I'm ramping up. I'm not ready for takeoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a conceivable thing.
Is that okay?
That's sort of the route that Rule took at Temple. That's the route he took at Baylor. He thinks he's a year further ahead. Maybe there's not Big Ten championship game in their future in 2024, but you set the foundation and you build the roster and you make it attractive for the portal people and the rest of the recruits. You're going in the right direction, right? I mean, what you painted is the picture that everybody wants, I think.
That's Mike Schaefer.
Without sacrifice in 2024.
Well, yeah. Everyone's going for that 10-win number.
That's Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. Thank you, Schaefer. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.